give it, and it's time. So let's
All
get
right.
going. So, welcome everyone to our final installment for today of the Super Saturday Recovery Summit. I've asked my friend John Taylor to present today, and he's going to present on Don't Wait Till You're Fixed. So, John has been doing for probably about 2 years on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com site a series of webinars called Rockin' Relationships, and they are valuable not just for relationships with significant others, but for relationships in general, whether it's coworkers, loved ones, whatever. I'm going to remind everybody that please do not request to share, nothing personal, but I will hit X and move you out. This is recorded. And so you can send through the chat to me any questions that you want to ask John, but you can download the slides. Don't wait till you're fixed and follow along. John, among many other things, he's been working in the field, and he can tell you a little bit more. But one of the things that well, he's really good on relationships, but I think one of the things he's done a great job too with is, enmeshment and that. So he's got his contact information on the slide. So do follow along, reach out. You can also follow along on the webinars. Alternating Thursdays on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, and he did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction. So I'm going to mute. I'm going to toggle again. Please do not request to share. Send your questions through the chat to me. I'm going to mute, and we're going to get started. You follow the slides. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tammy. And it's good to see all of your little thumbnails down here. So today I'm going to challenge, I guess, some of the conventional wisdom you might have gotten in coming into recovery. And I don't want to blow it up completely, but I want you to think about, I want to get each of you to think about the power that you can unlock in your recovery through also focusing on your relationships. So the conventional wisdom is fix yourself first and then work on your relationships, which there's a lot of good reason why that's the advice that's given. Unfortunately, most relationships do not do well on ice for a couple years at a time. So we're going to talk about some really simple things you guys can keep in mind and some things that you can do that will help improve relationships starting today. And just like Tammy was talking about with my sexandrelationshiphealing.com webinar a couple times a month, these tips are good for romantic relationships. They're good for coworkers. They're good for your family. They're good for your relationship with your children. So we're going to talk about some things that can start improving things right away. So first thing, and I've got a couple things under each one of these. We're going to talk about 3 main points. The first main point is you are not and cannot be as good at relationships as you think you are. To start with, your brain is wired to actually not do well at relationships. Your brain is really wired for one-person systems, keeping you alive. It's kind of a cruel trick because we're also wired for connection, but having connection go well and relationships go well is something that we have to learn. It's not innate in us. It can feel innate because we start learning about relationships from the day we're born. But really, relationships are something that we need to learn how to be good at. So your relationship, just by its wiring, it has one prime directive, and that is keep you alive, and it will do that at any cost. When things are settled down and life is not crazy and you're not in crisis, or you're not relying on a substance or behavior to make life work, your brain can do okay at relationships. We do a decent job at being socially reciprocal. We do a decent job at noticing other people. But when there's any kind of stress or any kind of survival situation, you're going to have what Dr. Stan Tatkin refers to as your primitives kick in. So these are the older parts of your brain that are very warlike, very conflict finding, conflict seeking, and conflict ending by any means necessary. So these parts of your brain are really good at fighting. They're really good at running away. They're really good at freezing. And then we have more sophisticated, or Stan Tatkin calls them the ambassador parts of the brain. And this is like your outer cortex. the stuff that starts to really develop around 8 years old and isn't fully developed for the average human being till about 25. In some males, it's not until our 30s. And I can attest to that. I was telling my son this morning, I've only felt like an adult for the last few years, and I'm in my mid-30s. So these outer cortex parts of the brain, these are the parts of the brain that can really mediate our primitive responses. Our brains like, you'll survive at all costs. And they can help us consider the value of relationships. They can help us be protective. They can help us be mutual. They can help us be sharing. So the point here is, remember that as good as you think you are at relationships, if you're in any kind of survival mode, those primitive parts of your brain are going to take over. And you may think that what you're doing is great relationship stuff and the problem lies with everybody else. But chances are, most of the time, especially early in recovery, you're not in great brain space to be a genius at relationships. And that can actually be empowering. Instead of having to hide behind, no, I do everything right and I can do everything well, just being able to say, like, step one stuff, I'm not so good at this. I'm learning. This isn't working well for me. The other thing to keep in mind, that addiction by definition is practicing something that can't make good relationships. So addiction is a very one-person system approach to life, meaning that it works really well for the person who's in that system, but not really well for anybody else. It's not mutual, it's not fair, it's not sharing power, which is what relationships need to be. Really good relationships are a true two-person system. That means it's mutual, we look out for each other, we take care of each other. For the addicts that I work with, their one-person system, who looked out for them was their addiction, their substance, their behavior, and that leaves, spouses, children, family, coworkers, even, they're kind of left out to dry in the ways that they need to depend on us, because we're not having a relationship with other people. We're having a primary relationship with our addiction. So again, this can be really empowering. Like I said, relationships are learned. Good relationships are learned. So if you're not doing well at it now, you can learn how to do better. And the first step to being able to learn how to do better is to admit that you don't know what you need to know. So being able to admit, I'm really good at the one-person system thing. That comes naturally for me. I'm trying to learn what to look for to make two-person relationships work. Keeping that paradigm, I think, that can help a lot, take a lot of the pressure out of the system. As an addiction therapist, I don't expect my clients to be stellar at relationships in the beginning. I do expect them to learn. Unfortunately, our spouses, our children, our coworkers, they want us to be good at relationships yesterday. Same thing, they want us to be sober yesterday. But we all know that this is a learning process. It takes time. And the more you focus on what it is you need to learn and the progress you're making, the better off you'll be. You'll be able to notice those successes that are meaningful to you and that are big milestones for you. And you'll be able to stay curious about your own process. I remember early in my recovery, I've been in recovery for, it's been close to 20 years now. And I remember early in recovery, some of those recognitions that I just had a hard conversation and I didn't get mad, or I didn't, withdraw. That's all that's your brain ambassadors coming on board. That's learning new things. That's getting more effective. It does happen over time. The next thing to keep in mind about what makes good relationships is you can read all sorts of books. You can watch things like this. You can talk to all sorts of people, and you can find, 1,000,001 different definitions about what a good relationship is. But for your partner, or the person that you're relating to right now, the only thing that makes a good relationship is what actually works between the two of you. So in essence, anyone you want to have a good relationship with, your job is to create the owner's manual for that person. That's really important with a spouse or a partner, because essentially you are their primary caregiver now, not in a weird codependent way, but in a interdependent, we rely on each other kind of a way. So the more you can learn about what your partner, your children, your coworkers, whoever it is you have to collaborate with, the people in your recovery circles, the more you can learn about how they work, what they like, the better you can show up as a good partner in a relationship. People essentially want safety in their relationships, and safety comes from a basic level of being seen. And so that's another thing you can put in the back pocket. If you're struggling in a relationship, it probably means that your owner's manual for that person is either non-existent or it's very outdated. So take some time to update the owner's manual. Learn things like favorite colors, favorite food, what makes you scared, what are you proud of, what's going on in your life today. Some of my favorite research from the Gottman Institute is one of the top 7 things that happy couples do is they know what's happening in each other's day. That simple. You're leaving, getting ready to leave for the day. You ask each other, what do you have going on today? You go through the itinerary, you come home, how'd things go today? It's not this deep, eye to eye, heart to heart conversation. It's, I know what's happening in your world. I know the players. That gives a big leg up in relationships. The next part here, it kind of dovetails with that. When it comes to relationships, how many of you early in recovery have either heard from yourself or other people, I didn't mean to? Again, I think that's a really important place to stop, to remember that the damage that you caused in all likelihood was not something that you intentionally did. You weren't out to hurt anybody. But keep in mind, in relationships, just like in recovery, our intention counts for a lot less than what we actually deliver. Gosh, I want to be sober. That's good. It's a good start. But wanting to be sober and getting sober are 2 different things. So relationships, it's the same way. It's not about so much how we feel about each other or what we want to give to each other. It's about what we do for each other. So the good news is you have a start on this already, because your recovery is all about how do I make the deliverables happen. Remember, in your relationship, it's about what I give to my partner, not what I intended to give to my partner. So an example of that would be, coordinating schedules. What time are you going to be home? And you tell your partner, I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock. You don't show up until 7 o'clock. Well, where were you? The kids have been, bouncing off the walls. The dogs need to be walked. I've been over my head. You really left me alone. Well, I meant to come home. That actually, not only will it count for nothing with your partner, it'll probably make them really angry because they didn't need your good intention. They needed your behavior to align. So spend the energy that you might normally spend on defending and explaining yourself on delivering what makes your partner's life better. Coming through for your coworker, being there for your kids, that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that kind of stuff goes way further than talking through your internal process. Talk with your sponsor about your internal process. Write to yourself about your internal process. That'll be motivating for you. But know that your relationships are looking for tangible deliverables, not just you feeling the right way. And we can get to the right deliverable without feeling connected to it. In fact, I think the ability to give the right deliverable over and over again, it comes from practicing the deliverable, and our feelings change towards that as we do the right thing over and over again. Again, think about resisting cravings. Who loves that initially? Nobody. But the more you do it, the more you hold the line, not only the easier it gets, the more rewarding it gets as well. Delivering what our relationships need is the same way. The second thing to remember is that you are in each other's care. This is the gold standard, I would say, for relationships. And I think it's a good idea for the person who's been struggling with addiction, is now finding recovery, to plan on going first. Take the first steps to show your partner that they are in your care. And I have a non-intimate relationship example of this. So several years ago, I was doing some training and I had to fly into Little Rock, Arkansas. And I flew in, I went to the training was really great. I get back to the airport and the skies are clear in Arkansas, but I guess in Chicago there was a big storm. And I wasn't flying through Chicago. Well, I get to the airport and I notice my flight has been delayed even before I get to the gate. So I go up to the ticket counter of the airline, and there's a nice young woman behind the desk. There wasn't much of a line. I walked right up and I said, I'm on this flight, looks like it's delayed. And she said, Yeah, Little Rock Airport has the worst track record in the country of on-time departures. And she said if anything goes wrong in Chicago, and she named like 3 other hubs, we, for whatever reason, we get the pinch. And I said, oh, well, that's disappointing. What can we do? And she said, well, here's the next flight that leaves. I'll get you on that flight. There's room. Like we'll get this taken care of. So as we're in the middle of this other person walks up, so irate that they didn't even wait in the line. They walk up and they start yelling at this ticket agent. My flight was delayed. What are you going to do to make this right? I want a refund. I want vouchers. And the ticket agent, was very polite and very professional and said, let me see what I can do to get you on another flight. And she click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. She said, I'm sorry, there's not anything else. Come and check back in an hour. The person throws up their hands and curses and walks away. And the ticket agent turns to me and she said, I actually didn't look anything up on the computer. She said, when people treat me that way, I don't want to help them. And she said, I know that you must be really frustrated that your flight's not going to get out, but I want you to know how much it means to me, how much it feels good that you've been polite and personable. And I think about that all the time because it's an example of when we take the first step in showing somebody, hey, I'm here to take care of you. You're going to be okay with me. We get so much better back than being defended, being short. So this is something to lock into your brain and dealing with your partner, your children, coworkers, family. Addiction over time, I think, erodes goodwill because it's that one person system thing. And it's not that everybody around the addicted person is fantastic at doing 2-person relationships. But when we're struggling with addiction, we are definitely not good at 2-person relationships. So people can be pretty fed up, they can be pretty stressed, and it can be hard for them to give the benefit of the doubt. If you can work on cultivating some of that, I guess you'd call it compassion, you'd call it ease, you'd call it that, like, what can I do here for you mentality? You can see a lot of that change over time, and again, with consistent deliverables. So remember that you're in each other's care, and in a interdependent relationship, when I take care of you, you're in a better position to take care of me. That's not I only rely on you to take care of me, or I'm the only one who takes care of you. That's part of the system here. We're getting good at taking care of ourselves. We're getting good at taking care of each other. And all of a sudden, we start to create these relationship systems that are really resilient and really valuable. So some things to, I guess, some basic information that might help you care for a partner better. These 2 terms, they come from Stan Tatkin's research. I train with him through the PACT Institute. He's written some really, really great books on relationships. But he talks about islands and waves, and these are some ways to describe different attachment styles. Islands are people who tend to take care of problems themselves. So when things go bad, islands tend to shut off. They kind of go into their own world. They get focused on what's the plan, what's the plan, what's the plan. Islands value outcome over how the relationship feels. So islands, I'm a really good island by nature. I can put together plans all day long and I can work hard really all day long. But I've been informed by my spouse on several occasions that when I'm in that mode, it's not fun to be around me. Because when islands are doing their island problem solving to get out of an emotional pinch thing, they're not real good at taking care of other people. They're not soft. They're not empathetic. Waves are used to describe people who have been disappointed over and over again. And that's how they approach relationships, is they're expecting disappointment. It's not to say that every addict and their partner, the addict is the island and the partner's the wave, but I see with the couples that I work with, often their relationship interactions break along these. Us addicts get really, really good at breaking off and solving our own problems, shutting the rest of the world out. When people come to help us, we might bite their head off because them approaching us when we're in that zone feels intrusive. And partners of addicts that I work with, they expect disappointment. They've been disappointed over and over again. So in the island and wave psychology, in that system, I would say like 95% of the time, it works better for the wave to be able to open up, calm down, have hope if their island partner will take the first difficult steps. And this is where, again, I think recovering addicts have you have a little bit of an advantage here is, again, you're already in the mode of, I'm trying new things. I'll take the first step, even if it's hard. I just know I can't go back to the way that things were. So you can adopt that in your relationship. If there's an apology to give, be the first one to give it. Apologies actually cost us nothing. And when they're done correctly, which is directly, I'm sorry for, and say what you did, they can be extremely, extremely helpful at repairing ruptures in relationships. Make sure that the apologies that you give are for things that are happening right now, at least in the beginning, because I'm sorry I screwed up, I'm sorry this is happening, like that can start to feel like background noise. But hey, I'm sorry, I know I said I was going to be home at 6, I was home at 7. That's not okay. I know that puts you in a hard spot. I will be working on that. And then follow through. Give that deliverable again and again. So from a psychological standpoint, and not just in your recovery, is it good for you to take the first step and be an agent for change in your own life and your relationship? It'll probably help start to heal some of your partner's wounds if you're willing to take the difficult first relationship steps. I always say to my clients too, if you want something to be a part of your relationship, you better be willing to put it on the table as well. Because again, it's that one person psychology system stuff to sit back and say, well, I want my partners to be kind to me, or I want them to be compassionate, and then not to deliver that. You have a system that's centered around you instead of when I'm in a relationship, we will be kind, we will be compassionate. When we have that kind of we mentality, it's really hard to keep score, because it doesn't matter who is being kind, it doesn't matter who is being compassionate. This is something we do, and if I see an opportunity to do it, I will always do it. So the basic premise here, basic care instructions, this makes me think of my 2 dogs, and in the slide deck I put pictures of my dogs. This was on our road trip last week. We went to Jackson Hole for spring break, and the dogs are big. Like the brown one's a standard poodle, the white one's a golden doodle, so we have like 120 pounds of dog there. Well, they got to sit by each other in the car, and they didn't really know how to share that kind of space. So every time they reconfigured and were like cuddling weird, we took pictures. So these are 3 of my favorite of them trying to figure out how to share space and get together. I think of my dogs when I think of basic care instructions for humans, because I don't think it's that different, at least the things that we're shooting for. So first, give your partner what they like. Again, that requires you to get to know them and what works really, really well for them. The white dog with the orange mohawk, Max, he likes cuddling. He likes me staring into his eyes. Like, he loves that kind of like, you're my big dumb baby stuff. Luna, the brown one, she's a little too sophisticated. She's a little too grown up for that kind of stuff. So she really likes it when I play games with her, when I hide a toy and she has to go find it, when we go for a run. I know this from spending time with them and watching them. So give the person that you're in a relationship with, give them what they like. How are you going to know what feels good to the other person or not? And we'll talk about this a little more later, but just watch their face. People have a hard time hiding arousal. So if you're doing something that's annoying, somebody's face will show that. If you're doing something that's upsetting, it'll show that. If it makes them sad, it'll show that. If they really like it, they'll show it. So when you're interacting with people, look them in the eye. As overwhelming as that can be, it's one of the most intense things we can do as human beings, but you're missing a whole lot of data about what's going on in the relationship if you don't look at your partner's face. So the second part is, once you know what it likes, let it feel good as much as possible. So there's 2 prongs to this in our relationships. It's not just, I know what you like and I'll provide that for you again and again. There's also a side of get out of the way in the ways that you have prevented your partner from accessing what makes them feel good. So I know for me, early in recovery, I'm very introverted by nature, and certainly, closer to active addiction, big group gatherings and social things were really difficult for me. So when I was first married, I was fairly new to recovery, and that was still difficult. That was something that I had to focus on to make my relationships better. My wife is very social. And so I needed to get out of the way. If anybody invited us to do anything, my automatic response was, no, I don't want to. I had to work on pulling that response back, and I had to work on understanding what that did for her and being able to say, well, it's not my favorite thing. I love what happens to you when we show up and do this. So I can, I can change out of my cranky pants, and I can show up, and I can be a good time. The third thing is don't overcommit. Over the years that I've been an addiction therapist, unfortunately, I've had a lot of clients who have said, getting a dog is going to help me. Dogs are good companions, right? And I always say, if you can really care for one, they can be great companions. I don't know how many clients I've had over the years who have gotten a dog and the dog has gone back to the adoption agency, to the pound, wherever, because relationships are a really big commitment. So by don't overcommit, I don't mean say to your relationships, I can't do anything right now. I mean, don't give your relationships the impression you can do more than you can. So if again, to the showing up on time example, which I think is really, dependability is really important in relationships. If you haven't mastered that yet, don't give people the idea that you'll be on time every time. Say, I'm really working on this. I struggle with this. I'm going to try to hit it within a half hour. Let people know exactly what they can expect. Because when you overcommit, what that gives your relationships the impression of is that you're willing to say anything that needs to be said to get off the hook, and you're really not interested in delivering what your partner needs. So the basic care instructions, again, know your relationship, give your partner what they like, let your partner feel good as much as possible, and you'll know they're feeling good by watching their face. Again, you might even want to write some of that stuff down. It worked really, really well when I shared gratitude. It worked really, really well when we went for a walk, so that you can remember. And then don't overcommit. Give realistic expectations of what you're able to do. And a lot of the times I find in recovery, our relationships aren't super pleased with all we can do, but they would rather that we tell the truth than that we lie. So again, remember, it's a learning curve. If you're focused on this and working on this, you're only going to get better over time. So even if your partner's disappointed by what you cannot do, be honest about it, and that will build that honesty and that truthful communication going forward. Relationships take skill, and like I said earlier, these are things that are learned. So you have a lot of opportunities to practice. And by that, I mean, if you're here, you're probably in some kind of primary recovery community, whether that's 12 steps, smart recovery, maybe a therapy group. Those are the places for you to practice your relationship skills. If you're afraid to tell the truth, there's no better place to practice than a room full of other people who have a hard time telling the truth, because they'll get it when you struggle to come out with it. When you do that with your spouse and you're beating around the bush to get to the truth, that's actually going to aggravate your spouse or your partner more, because again, that primitive brain, it fills in the gaps with the worst possible scenario. That's biological. It'll just do it. So one thing I see with the folks that I work with in recovery, they need a lot of practice in getting right to the point. So practice that with your recovery circles. Practice that with your sponsor. Practice that with your group. Practice talking about emotions there. That's only something that can benefit your non-recovery relationships, is when you know what you lack in relationships and practice with your group. Part of that, I would say, is learn what your shortcuts are. People take what I would call shortcuts in relationships or bypasses because they either lack ability, they don't know how to do it. They have an attachment history that makes a certain aspect of relationships difficult for them, or they could have a biological constraint. Like Tammy was saying before we logged on, ADHD and ADD are a big deal in the recovery community. I'd say that's a biological constraint. Your brain is wired in a way that works a certain way that makes certain relationship tasks difficult. Autism spectrum stuff can be the same thing. There can be things like, and of course I would forget the word now, aphasia, which is difficulty recognizing emotion. No, aphasia is a speech thing. I'll think of the name, but difficulty recognizing emotional expression, that can be a biological thing as well. So get to know what these different things look like for you. Where do I lack skill? Where do I have an attachment history that makes certain relationship things scary? Where have I always struggled? You can talk with your doctor or your therapist if you're concerned about any places where, or if you're concerned about where some of your shortcuts might come from. I've worked with enough people over the years that, if there are like autism or non-neurotypical issues, it makes recovery a lot easier and relationships a lot easier to have that diagnosis and be getting good treatment and good help with that. So as part of your recovery, go get a physical, go get blood work, talk with your therapist about concerns you might have about your mental and emotional functioning. Set yourself up to be on a really solid ground so you don't have to take relationship shortcuts anymore. I have a guy right now who's in my men's group, and it's not the first thing he introduces himself, but one of the first things he says is, I'm on the autism spectrum and emotional recognition doesn't come easy for me. So if I laugh inappropriately or I'm having a hard time syncing up, know that I want to, and I'm practicing, I'm getting better at that, but I struggle. He has some of the best relationships with the other men in that group because he knows what his constraints are. He knows what the workarounds are. Some specific ones I would say to look for that I see with a lot of the addicted folks I work with early in recovery. Learn what your manipulation patterns are. We all have them. Manipulation essentially is, I've learned how to get what I want without having to ask for it. I bend and cajole everybody else to give me what I want. I'm not direct about it. So get to know what your manipulation patterns are, because especially people you've been in a relationship with for a long time, they know what they are, and your manipulation patterns drive them crazy. So if you can learn what they are and learn how to be direct with your needs, again, you have better relationships in the pipeline. For ways that you might punish and pout, again, those are one-person relationship things. If this doesn't go my way, or if I'm upset, or if I'm anxious, I'll tend to withdraw, and I'll do it in a way that says, don't you dare come follow me. That's really isolating. That's really difficult for relationships, and it's really taxing on relationships. So if you can learn your withdraw, punishing, and pouting patterns, again, you can challenge yourself. You can work on, I'm going to talk about this instead of push away. I'm going to tell you I'm upset, I'm hurt, rather than just walk away. And like I talked about before, hard time recognizing emotion. That's something that can actually be practiced. That's one of the reasons why I love group for addiction recovery, is because you get to study a lot of different emotion and talk about it. You get to learn to tag, this face means this emotion, and that can be so helpful in relationships. Looking people in the eye is another way. We talked about this before. This is an essential relationship skill. Like I said, it's one of the most neurologically intense things that we can do. It's also a really great regulator. Two people who are looking each other in the eye with any kind of closeness, like 4 feet or less, they either have to decide whether they're going to destroy each other or embrace each other. So, and that's biological. So when you are talking with someone who matters to you, when you're in a meeting, like, look people in the eye will help regulate you, and that will help regulate them. It's almost impossible to hold eye gaze with another person and not have it be mutually regulating. Again, unless, like I said, the two of you have decided that you're going to destroy each other, then eye gaze becomes a threatening thing. But most of the time it's really calming. It's really, really hard at first. It will get easier the more you practice it. And it doesn't have to be this intense stare thing. You want to check what the eyes are doing every now and then. When I'm talking with my spouse and the eye gaze is getting intense, I study these muscles, I study these muscles, I look at what her mouth is doing, I watch her breathing. It's that close study idea. It gives me a lot of information about what's going on with her. And it helps, especially when we're talking about intense things, when I can see that her body really is relaxed. When we're talking about this intense thing, that helps me relax. A lot of the time, there can be big miscommunications on sensitive subjects in relationships that have nothing to do with the words that we're speaking, or the words are disconnected from what our body's saying. I'm calm. I have this concern I want to talk through, but we start World War III with that. So look in the eyes. It'll get easier over time, and it helps you immensely. The last thing that I'll say, lock into your mind with this, with relationship stuff. Show it, don't tell it. You'll get your point across if you really are committed to a relationship and you want it to work. It's good to remind your partner verbally of that every now and then. But if your actions don't align, if your deliverables don't align with that intention, they're going to be left with a lot of confusion and hurt. So if you're relying on the ability to say I'm sorry to smooth over arguments, well, show you're sorry. Again, if you're in the habit of being an hour late, figure out how to get there on time, or figure out how to make your commitment to be able to commit to what you can actually do instead of committing to something that you can't. If you're saying you're sorry, how do you show that? Well, I make time to go to my recovery meetings. I practice my 10th step. I take daily inventory. When I'm wrong, I promptly admit it. If I'm telling you I love you, I put as many caring actions as possible towards you. I know what you like. I don't get in the way, and I provide you things that you like, and I don't overcommit. So show what you feel instead of relying on telling what you feel. Again, that's what we're looking for in relationships, is deliverables. That's all I have for today. So do we have questions?
So if you have a question, put it through the chat to me, and I will ask John to answer that. So love this. I was thinking, the sober does not magically mean good relationships, because you were talking early on about, people want it yesterday. And I see that so often that loved ones are going like, well, this person is, sober now, and they've been sober 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
why don't they have empathy? Why aren't they doing, all that? So just a reminder, please do not ask to share if you chat the questions to me, but this is being recorded. So if you try to go to the people requesting to share box, it's nothing personal, but I'm going to hit you X out for that. So just send your questions via chat to me. But going back to what I was saying, they expect that now that somebody's in recovery, that they've stopped the acting out behavior, whatever form that is, that they're magically going to know how to do life and have empathy and have understand their emotions and all that. And like you said, it's practice, it's learning new things. It's such a learning curve
Mm-hmm.
in recovery. We lack those skills. Like you said, it's a one person system, so learning to be in a two person and not just be selfish about me is a completely different philosophy. How do you deal with, this is a great question. How do you deal with difficult people?
Ooh, which kind? There's
I
a
know, I was
lot.
thinking, well, there was the ticket lady who did, that was dealing with a difficult person, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say priority one in dealing with difficult people is, if you can't keep your mind and body intact for yourself, you've already lost. So first of all is focus on how you're doing. And it's okay to have reactions to difficult people. I always know when a particular personality style walks into my office, because within minutes I'm vibrating inside and I feel sick to my stomach.
Oh, wow.
Your body tells you your body tells you how you're doing in the relationship. So the most important thing I can do there, and I made this mistake a lot early in my relationship, is I would confront, and I would start an argument that blew everything up, and the person left, and never to come back, which in one respect was okay with me, but in the other respect I'm thinking, why do I do this? Now what I do is I sit quietly and I focus on my breathing, and the more escalated they get, the calmer I get. When you can focus on how your body is doing first, you have kept choices intact for what to do in the relationship. If you're getting really, really wound up by a difficult person, the only choice that you have is to fight or flee. So you're either going to lean into that person and rip their head off, or you're going to shrink into nothingness and go away. So if you have to, as you're dealing with a difficult person, if you have to stretch, I do this a lot because if I keep space here, I have options. So that would be my first piece of advice is take care of your body, regulate your emotions. Second is I find, at least in my life, the difficult people that I deal with, it's patterned, meaning I really only deal with a couple types of difficult people because every relationship we have is an interaction. So, half of the ingredients are mine. So when I talk with a partner, when I talk with a therapist, when I talk with a sponsor about my difficult relationships, I learn a lot about what's going on with me, and I learn about what I can change that helps to navigate those difficult relationships. A good percentage of the difficult people that I deal with, it actually has very little to do with them and a lot more to do with me. That personality profile, that's totally from my attachment history. That's totally from my trauma history. So the better I know that, the more I know how to take care of myself rather than trying to shift the other person. So talk through those difficult interactions and do it in a way that is as honest as possible. Your first draft of your relationship story or your story of dealing with a difficult person is probably going to set you up to be a blameless victim and them to be a horrible monster. I personally have not met any horrible monsters in my life. I've met some really, really wounded people, but I don't think by and large that horrible monsters exist out in the wild. So if you're telling a story that casts somebody else as a horrible monster and you this blameless victim, you're probably not being honest with yourself about what's going into that interaction. So take that 4-step approach and do a real searching moral inventory on those interactions, and you'll probably find some things that you can shift as well. If you don't know what boundaries are or how to enact them, focus on that. Tammy always says this when we're doing the sex and relationship healing webinars. Boundaries are not a way to keep people out. They're actually to guide people in. This is the best way that you get access to me. This is the best way that you be close to me. So learn about boundaries, because difficult people only get the airtime that we allow them to have. Whether that's psychologically, I can shut you out, the wall goes down and nothing's getting in, or physically, I rearrange my life so that this chronic, difficult relationship isn't something that I have to deal with any more than I absolutely have to. So those would be some ideas.
She added, how do you speak to a know-it-all who knows nothing? Avoid them. So that's a particular type of
Yeah.
difficult personality. So
Yeah, I mean, think about that one person, two-person relationship thing. Speaking to somebody and sharing ideas only works if you're both bought into doing that. So if you're talking with a know-it-all, they're interested in teaching you, not the other way around. So you might hold your tongue, or you might say, "Oh, I just forgot, I got to go somewhere." Or you might be really direct and say, "This doesn't feel like a two-way conversation, and that doesn't feel good to me." So yeah, there are. I'm not of the opinion that we can and should be able to interact with every person in every situation. Sometimes the very best thing we can do is recognize, oh, this isn't set up for both of us to win. So then we find a way not to play that game anymore.
yeah, and I've had that, and I was like, everybody. I said it earlier on a phone call today. Somebody was, and I said, everybody gets to choose. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
gets to choose their path. So,
Mm-hmm.
you are entitled to do whatever you wish to do. But holding that space for me, I was on this is months ago. I was on a difficult phone call, and I found, like you said, your body. I was escalating, and my voice was going higher, and I finally said, wait, like I have to stop and take a breath, because and I did on a call. I was like, I am not, this is not, I'm not going to be able to be helpful for you because I'm, finding myself in a difficult place. So I took a couple of deep breaths and I said, let's start again. And then it went much better. So, but I found myself like the whole physical, just getting all agitated and all that. And I was like, over what,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to take a little analysis of, is it really oh, so somebody's asking how, so the slides are always so if you look at in the blue bar above John, you'll see "Don't Wait Till You're Fixed." You can download those. So Eddie Caparucci's and Allison Ehrenberg's are both up there too. But if you download those, you'll see the information, and his contact information is on the last slide. His website is www.whitepinerecovery.com. His email address is jtaylortherapy@gmail.com. So you can find him there, and you can find him on sexandrelationshiphealing.com twice a month on our webinars on Thursdays, and the previously recorded. We've got, I don't even know. There's got to be like, I don't even know.
I'm in my
70 or
third year
100.
doing those.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it
we've
really?
got a
So
lot.
you have to have like 100 of these, previously recorded. So for the people that are trying to pop into the people requesting to share, a reminder, we don't do that. These are recorded, so you can send me a chat and I will ask the question. Somebody's asking about, is Dr. Caparucci accepting new patients? I don't know. His contact information is also on the slide. So absolutely reach out to any of the people that you've found here. Eddie Caparucci will be on next Wednesday on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. He does the third week of the month every Wednesday on our webinars. Great information. You can join him there as well. So other questions for John? I know what else I was going to say. The owner's manual. I loved that analogy, the owner's manual. And I was like, the thought of having to create an owner's manual for every relationship kind of feels daunting, but it also feels exciting that like I can, I get to figure out what this relationship is going to need and how it's going to work. And if it's a relationship, hopefully I'm working with the other person to create the owner's manual, that it's not just me figuring it all out by myself, but we're having a conversation about it.
That's a great point, Tammy. That's a recipe for resentment. If you're just going to sit back and study and think that you're going to learn it well, share those insights with your partner. Hey, it seems like you really appreciate when it's clear that you're my priority, when I say no to this to say yes to you. Is that right? Yeah, that's the most important thing in the world to me. Or it seems like you really like, talking with your mother every day. No, it's just that she calls me every day. I don't like it at all. You learn a lot more by observing and checking out your assumptions. That actually can be a really fun part of building relationships, is just, I notice this about you. Am I on the right track? There's hours and hours of conversations to be had there.
So they were actually asking if you're accepting new patients. You are licensed in the state of Utah.
Yep.
So are you doing any workshops or other things that are beyond? So to talk a little bit about your work.
Yeah. So I primarily work with individuals and couples, and that's you've got to be in the state of Utah or I can't work with you. I do work with Dr. Ken Adams doing enmeshment workshops. I'm actually doing one the first weekend of May. And then I'll probably be doing another one we're looking at the end of July. So those are workshops, and I work with people across the world in those on mother enmeshment issues. So if that is barking up your tree, you can go to overcomingenmeshment.com. You can reach out to them and you can get in my next workshop. Working with me directly, again, there's the Sex and Relationship Healing webinars, and that's a place where you can ask questions. But therapeutically, I can only work with residents of Utah because that's the only place that I'm licensed.
So this person says, how do you deal with a partner who doesn't express their thoughts and emotions?
You get really patient and you understand that they probably came by that honestly. A lot of times we look at what people do that bugs us in relationships, and we assume that they do it for nefarious reasons. I did a webinar with Tammy on this a little while ago. It's a negative attribution bias, which means if you're doing something I don't like, it's because you're evil. If I do something that's not good for other people, it's because I had a bad day. We tend to attribute bad intention to other people. So you work on the compassion. You might even ask yourself, what do I know about this person's background that might make this kind of interaction really hard for them? So get compassionate, and then again, go back to the owner's manual. And it may not be that your partner doesn't express emotion and thought. It might mean that they do it in a very certain way, or they do it in a way that feels most comfortable and least threatening for them. So learn what that is. I know when my spouse and I were first dating, I was going to be, this not wrapped up with this new technological craze of texting all the time. And so when she would text me, I would call her back and she wouldn't answer, and she would text me more. And I found, this is a couple years into our marriage, she texted me about something pretty serious we needed to talk about. And I played along, and I texted, and I came home that day and she said, "Thanks for engaging me with me like that. I know it's not your favorite way to talk, but when something's really scary, it's easier for me if I can let it out a little bit at a time." And learning that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally willing to text you on anything hard, as if that means that we have a chance at getting through it. I'll totally do it that way. So getting to know their style and their approach, again, don't assume that they don't talk about it or don't like to. They may just not do it in a way that's readily recognizable for you. So asking what you can do to be a better receiver. A lot of the addicts and partners that I work with, again, that first point, you're not as good at relationships as you thought you are, and you can't be as good as you think you could be, or you think you should be. A lot of times we don't understand how difficult it can be to talk to us. That's part of becoming aware of your tendencies to bypass. I've actually had to work on how soft and expressive my face is, because prior to working on that, my face was very hard and unapproachable. People thought I hated them off the bat. And I usually didn't. It's just that I was really protected and defended.
Usually, I like that.
Usually.
I usually didn't.
Now I don't meet many people that I don't like. But there was a time where I didn't like most of the people that I met. But we have to also work on our receptive end. Again, there's no angels and there's no devils. Relationships are always a two-person system. So if your partner's having a hard time communicating, also look at how you might have a difficult time receiving what they have to communicate.
I was thinking while you were talking about the texting with your wife, I was like, like you can go, but that's not the way I do it. And
Mhm.
like I want to call. And if you dig your heels in that much, you miss the opportunity. So doing things that are uncomfortable for us, not our preferred manner, we would rather have this, if it's good for the relationship, if it helps us, it's worth doing things that we are less thrilled about. So
If
okay.
it's good for you and helps you connect with me, it's good for me too.
Exactly. Okay, so the next question. What part do we play in a relationship with a narcissistic personality, which all addicts are? The difficult person question from earlier. I'm having trouble seeing what percentage of responsibility is there for the person being gaslighted, etc.
Yeah, I would just there's one piece of that I would speak to directly. A lot of addicts have narcissistic personality traits. Again, it's that one person thing, but that's different from being a narcissist. So again, this goes back to like caring for the puppy. Don't overcommit. Your narcissistically traded partner, or your partner might be a full-blown narcissist. I don't know. They may want you to apologize for everything. If you honestly can't see anything that you need to apologize for, don't overcommit and apologize. If you really are, if you're getting gaslighted, if you're getting manipulated, don't fold. All of this stuff I talked about in relationships, it has no bearing in abusive relationships. So if you're in an abusive relationship, whether it's psychologically, physically, emotionally, sexually, throw this playbook out and get yourself safe. Put boundaries around yourself before looking at engaging with your partner. Make sure that you can come back to a safe physical and psychological space. And if you're in a relationship with a true narcissist, that's not a safe relationship for you. So again, you throw this playbook out because you do have to focus on the one person system there, because you wouldn't be in a relationship with a person who could do a two person system. Again, I want to be really clear, not every addict in recovery is a narcissist.
Or they'll have narcissistic traits, but yeah, I have all these people
Absolutely.
that saying, you know, my spouse loved one is it has narcissistic personality disorder. Unless they have been diagnosed by a
Mhm.
trained professional, you know, please don't automatically go there, because it's like,
Yeah.
then there's like no hope, you know. But if they're an addict and they're narcissistic, there's hope, because we learn to do life differently. You know, you and I are
Yeah.
both examples of learning to do life differently and not acting in our narcissism. We've learned, you know, with recovery tools, to be different. So
Yeah.
okay, next one. I had that with a sibling who insisted on communicating and leaving messages in a specific way that was opposite of my preferred way, and would then get mad that I didn't follow her preferences to the T when communicating with her. I explained, hang on. I explained about how that way was just not, it didn't work for me, and most of the time, so I didn't often get her messages, but she didn't want to hear it. So
Yeah, I mean, that's all relationships come down to negotiation. And again, in that don't overcommit part, um, there's things that I do for my spouse, for my children, for other people I have close relationships with, that honestly, they're an annoyance to me, but they're not that big of a deal. So I can do them. If it really is that big of a deal, if it really isn't something that you can make work, be honest about that. And, there's consequences for misattunements, meaning we can't be 100% back to back all the time. So there will be parts of the relationship that don't work smoothly. But again, the way we engage about that makes all the difference. If it's no, you do it my way, no, you do it my way, we have a relationship that's perpetually going to be in stress. If it's, yeah, I wish you would know that I don't check my voicemail, but when I do, I know I'll always have 6 messages from you, and I'm happy to return them then. Um, there's nuances and quirks and parts of every relationship that don't work very well, and you may not iron them all out. But the way we approach trying to iron it out or figure out what's happening makes a big difference.
this person adds, she wouldn't negotiate. She insisted I do things exactly the way she wanted all the time, and with this and other things. So to me, I mean, that's one of those, I would have to set up my boundaries of what's going to work for
Mm-hmm.
me, and that
Yep.
person would not be in my close circle, because there isn't negotiation. It isn't a mutual relationship. It isn't somebody
Yeah.
that's also trying to build up and have it be it's a, you know, all me all the time.
Yeah. There's only so much energy we have for the important relationships. That means we can't have 15 most important relationships. We can have like 1 or 2. So when I was early in recovery, a lot of my relationships that didn't work more smoothly, they got demoted. The relationships that didn't have to be priority, my relationship with my spouse and my children, those were always number 1 and 2. But friendships and things like that, depending on the energy level that I have and the skill that I have to engage, sometimes those relationships get demoted if they're going to be too energy intensive. Like Tammy said, they don't become our most important relationships with the person we go to all the time. It may be, I talk to you every now and then when I know I have the energy for it.
Yes, and there's certain just because I'm blood related to certain people does not mean that they are in my inner circle of people. And
Amen.
there are some that are, but yeah, yeah. I mean, it's, if we are working towards, you know, a good relationship together, I'm in that. If it's, you know, but unfortunately, I have multiple people in my family, you know, that just isn't the case. But fortunately,
Yeah.
I've got some really great ones. So.
Yeah.
We are out of time, I think. Thank you so much, John, for
Thank you for the
joining us
invite.
today. And everyone, great questions. Thank you for your participation. The videos from all 3 today will be posted hopefully in the next week or so, on In the Rooms. You can see John Taylor, like I said, twice a month on sexandrelationshiphealing.com on Thursdays, and clearly hundreds of hours of previously recorded webinars on that site too. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.